was a cold winter morning in Fort Meade, Maryland. Snow blanketed the streets, and the breath of the dark suits turned to fine foam as they passed through the security checkpoint. Inside the National Security Agency, NSA headquarters, the air was as cold, mysterious, and tense as ever. This was not a place for the faint of heart. Everything that happened here belonged to the world of darkness, of secrets never revealed, and of people that history never mentioned. But today, everything changed. Something that had never happened before was happening. The heavy steel doors of the NSA headquarters were not expected to open. No notification, no script, no special shouts of praise as one would expect when an important personage comes here. Just a lone man walked in. His footsteps echoed on the cold marble floor, each echo like a blow to the stillness of the control room. The entire apartment stopped. All eyes turned to him. Donald Trump. The NSA agents froze in the room, their hands unconsciously pressing the files in their hands. Some were still processing information from the surveillance cameras, while others were looking at the table about the high-level security threat. But right now it all repeated itself, as if time had just frozen. A young agent, Ryan Carter, stood nearby, soothing the security, looking coaxingly at the man who had just entered. He gasped, then turned to his colleagues, whispering in a shocked chaos, "Do we have any notice of the former president's arrival at headquarters?" No one answered. No one in this apartment had been given any instructions. No schedule, no internal email, no signal warning from the security system. But Trump was still there, flesh and blood, and he didn't seem to be expecting permission. At that moment, Ethan Caldwell, the director of the NSA, a seasoned man with a mop of cornflower hair and piercing eyes, emerged from the executive office. His face was calm, but his eyes held a series of questions. If you love engaging, dramatic stories and thrilling cases, don't forget to subscribe to the channel today. Each video is a journey full of surprises, taking you into the world of unsolved mysteries. Join me in exploring, analyzing, and feeling every detail of the story. Caldwell had touched many important people throughout his career. He had sat at the table with the most powerful people in the world, had handled crisis situations where the slightest mistake could have plunged America into chaos. But he had never seen Donald Trump appear here without warning. Slowly walking toward Trump, Caldwell's voice was low but authoritative. "Mr. Trump, this is unexpected. How can I help you?" Trump did not answer immediately. Instead, he glanced around the room, a look that was not merely observant but assessing. His eyes were sharp, searching, as if he were searching for something or someone. After a few seconds, Trump packed his voice. "I need to find someone." His voice rang out clearly, without delay, without anticipation. Caldwell's eyes dimmed. The agents in the room began to exchange glances. "Who?" Caldwell asked. Trump gently clasped his hands, then said each word firmly. "An agent. The one who saved my life 40 years ago." The apartment was a dead, motionless room. Some stepped back, trying to remember any data about Trump having been threatened in the past. But no one remembered anything. Caldwell frowned. He was the NSA director. If there was an agent who had saved the former president's life, he would know. But there was no one. "Can you tell me the name of that agent?" Caldwell asked, his tone cautious. Trump shook his head slowly. "No name, no record, no trace. But I do know one thing." Trump paused, took a deep breath, and continued. "He had a long scar on his left hand, and before he disappeared into the night, he said only one word to me: Shadow 1. Everyone in the room seemed to hold their breath. Caldwell blinked. Sarah Whitmore, one of the senior data analysts, suddenly looked up from her computer screen, her face suddenly more serious than ever. "Shadow 1, she muttered. "We have no record of this person." Trump narrowed his eyes. "Then search," he said, his voice low but carrying an undeniable authority. Caldwell exchanged glances with Sarah, then turned to the group of agents around them. "Begin the search immediately." The agents sprang into action. Hands were typing furiously on keyboards. Computer screens lit up with a flurry of search algorithms. The NSA's top-secret database was being scanned line by line, searching for any trace of the name Shadow 1. But then, Something unbelievable happened. Sarah paused, staring at the screen, her face pale. Caldwell noticed the change immediately. "What's going on?" Sarah swallowed. Her voice shook as she replied, "Nothing. Every record from the ADS related to Shadow 1 has been erased." A chill ran down the spines of everyone in the room. Caldwell turned to Trump, his eyes darkening. "Are you sure this man exists?" Trump didn't blink. He looked straight at Caldwell and said slowly, "I'm alive today because of him." At that moment, everyone in the NSA headquarters understood that what they were about to investigate was not an ordinary case. They were not just looking for a man who had disappeared. They were following the trail of a ghost, a mystery that had been erased from history. And the biggest question now was, why? New York, winter 1982. Snow was falling heavily on the streets of Manhattan, covering the skyscrapers in a cold white blanket. The city that never sleeps was bustling, but in a hidden corner of it, a shocking event that had never been recorded in history is about to unfold. That was the night Donald Trump almost lost his life. Trump was 36 years old, a young businessman building his real estate empire. The name Trump was gradually appearing in the newspapers, and skyscrapers bearing his brand began to rise in the center of New York. But those who knew the underworld well knew that it was not easy to succeed in New York in the ADS. That night, Trump had just left a closed-door meeting at the Plaza Hotel where he was negotiating a major real estate deal. When he stepped into his luxurious black limousine, no one, not even he himself, could have suspected that a pair of eyes were watching him from afar. A figure quietly pressed the headset. His cold voice rang out over the radio. "He is leaving. It's time." No one in Trump's security team realized that they had been followed for days, and tonight the people in the dark decided to strike. The limousine rolled down Fifth Avenue, the neon lights of the billboards reflecting off the glossy black glass. The driver slowly turned onto a side street to avoid rush-hour traffic, but as soon as the car entered a deserted alley, a black SUV suddenly swerved out in front of it. Bam! The car stopped abruptly, the wheels skidding on the slippery snow. Trump barely had time to realize something was wrong when the car door was wrenched open and two masked men dragged him out. One of them pushed him to the cold ground, a pistol pointed at his head. His voice was full of menace. "You think you can enter our world without paying the price?" "Criminal gang!" Trump had no doubt. He could feel the cold barrel of the gun pressed against his temple. The man's breath billowed white in the New York cold. In that moment, death was too close. But just as the killer pulled the trigger, bang! A bullet tore through the night, shooting right through his hand. The robber screamed in pain, the gun flying to the ground. The others turned toward the shot, but it was too late. From the darkness, a man rushed out. He moved faster than anyone Trump had ever seen. An agent? An assassin? No one knew. All that was known was that in less than 10 seconds he took them down, one by one, with ruthless, machine-like precision. The blow broke bones. The kick knocked out. The gun was knocked out of his hand. No one had a chance to shoot back. No one had time to react. He was just one man, but he had taken out 4 armed men in the blink of an eye. Before Trump could recover, the man's hand yanked him to his feet, and that was when he saw a long scar on the man's left hand, a scar like a mark of war, a sign of a man who had survived the unimaginable. Over the distant sound of police sirens, Trump tried to ask, "Who are you?" The man did not answer immediately. He looked straight at Trump, his eyes sharp and cold. Then he said only one sentence, "Never let them win." Then he disappeared into the darkness. The next day, Trump tried to find out who the man was. He went to the New York Police Department. There were no reports of an attack that night. He contacted the Secret Service. No one on his security team knew about it. He checked the security cameras near the alley. No records. It was as if the man had never existed. It was as if he had been saved by a ghost. The only name Trump had from the incident that night was the mysterious nickname the man had given him, Shadow 1. Back to the present. Fort Meade, Maryland, 2024. Donald Trump stood in the middle of the NSA headquarters, his voice calm but carrying the weight of 4 decades of mystery. I don't care who tried to erase him. I just want one thing. Find Shadow One. The room fell silent. Everyone knew they had just entered a story that no one should have delved into. Trump isn't looking for a person. He's uncovering a secret that someone has buried for 40 years. And the biggest question is, should this truth be allowed to exist? The atmosphere in the NSA operations room had been heavy and tense since Donald Trump had made the request to find Shadow One, the man who had saved his life 40 years earlier. 4 decades. A hero with no name, no record, no trace. A mystery buried on purpose. The agents in the room did not dare to speak. They knew this was not simply a matter of finding a missing former agent. They were digging up a secret that might have been hidden by forces more powerful than the government. Ethan Caldwell, the director of the NSA, sat slowly in his chair, his hands clasped together, his eyes dark. "Mr. Trump," he said slowly, his voice thoughtful, "I have worked in intelligence for nearly 30 years, and I have never heard of the name Shadow One." Trump did not waver. He looked straight at Caldwell, his voice as steady as a rock in a storm. "Just because you haven't heard of him doesn't mean he doesn't exist." Caldwell sighed, then turned to Sarah Whitmore, one of the NSA's best data analysts. Sarah typed rapidly on the keyboard, algorithms scanning millions of files from the NSA, CIA, FBI, and Department of Defense. The screen glowed, streams of data streaming in like a flood, searching for any information related to the name Shadow One. Search, Shadow One, querying data, scanning classified archives, checking encryption. Result, no data. Caldwell frowned. Sarah checked again, but the results were the same. Search, NSA agents missing in the ADS, no data. Caldwell took a deep breath, his sharp eyes flashing dangerously. "No way!" Trump clenched his fists. He had seen this before. When a truth was buried, it wasn't just gone, it was intentionally erased. Someone had tried to erase Shadow One from history, and that was how Trump knew he existed. How could a man disappear from every database? Sarah bit her lip, thinking for a moment, then suddenly typed another command into the keyboard. Search, encrypted and erased files from the ADS. Querying, 20 encrypted records deleted by order of federal agencies. Sarah frowned. Secret files erased by order of the NSA, CIA, and Department of Defense were usually only related to top-secret operations or missions that could endanger national security. But on that list, there was one name in particular. Operation Black Phoenix, completely erasing 1984. Sarah read the name out loud, causing the entire room to fall silent. Black Phoenix. A top-secret operation erased from history. And it was possible Shadow One was a part of it. "Do we have anyone alive who was involved in Black Phoenix?" Trump asked, his voice hard. Sarah glanced at Caldwell. The director hesitated, then said, "Only one. Benjamin Graves, former NSA undercover agent, retired in 1995 and has refused any contact with the government since." Trump looked at Caldwell, his eyes as sharp as knives. "Find him. I want to see him right away." Back in the past, what is Black Phoenix? 1981, somewhere in America. A small group of NSA, CIA, and Pentagon agents were assembled for a top-secret mission. They had no identities, no records, no pasts. Their mission? Infiltrate an international criminal network that involved U.S. government officials. But there was one thing no one knew. One of the agents in that operation went too far. He found evidence that the government did not want to make public. He knew too much, and so he was erased from history. His name was Shadow One. Fort Meade, Maryland. Donald Trump knew he was walking into a story that was not simple. Someone had tried to erase Shadow One from history. Someone had ordered the erasure of all traces of Operation Black Phoenix, and if Trump continued to dig into this secret, he might anger the most dangerous forces in America. But Trump was not afraid. He owed the man. And no matter who he faced, he would not stop. Find Benjamin Graves. We must know the truth. This story was just beginning. Virginia suburbs, a forgotten house. 3 hours after Donald Trump ordered the search for Benjamin Graves, an armored SUV rolled silently down a foggy Virginia suburb. The landscape was deserted, the trees were bare from winter, and a heavy, gloomy atmosphere hung over everything. They were not visiting an ordinary former agent. They came looking for a man who knew too much and chose to disappear. Inside the car, Trump sat brooding, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. He had met countless powerful people in his life, from billionaires to heads of state, to the most dangerous men in the world. But this time, the feeling was different. Beside him, NSA Director Ethan Caldwell carefully reviewed the documents in his hands. His voice was low. "Trump, I need you to understand this. Benjamin Graves is no longer the man we knew. He no longer trusts the government. No longer trusts anyone." Trump did not blink. "I don't need him to trust me. I just need the truth." The SUV stopped in front of an old wooden house deep in the woods. There was no house number, no phone signal, just an eerie silence. If a man wanted to disappear from the world completely, this was the place to do it. Caldwell got out first, carefully observing his surroundings. He knocked 3 times on the wooden door. Silence. He knocked again, harder this time. Still no response. Trump stepped forward. He was not a patient man. He grasped the doorknob, and as soon as he touched it, a deep voice said from inside, "Go away. I have nothing to say to you." Trump did not hesitate. "Benjamin, open the door." There was a click. The door slowly opened, and an old man with silver hair, a shaggy beard, and the piercing eyes of someone who had survived the unimaginable stepped out. Benjamin Graves. Benjamin crossed his arms over his chest, blocking the doorway, his gaze unwavering. "I don't care what you're doing here. I left your world a long time ago." Trump didn't back down. "You know why I'm here, Graves. I'm looking for the Shadow One." Graves stiffened slightly. His eyes sharpened. For a moment he looked at Trump as if he were considering whether to kill him right away. "Let it go, Trump." Graves shook his head. "This is a story no one wants to tell." Trump took a step forward, his voice quiet but carrying an undeniable gravity. "That man saved my life. Who else in the world cares if he lives or dies? Someone tried to erase him from history, but I didn't let that happen." There was a long silence. Benjamin closed his eyes, sighing. "Trump, you don't understand. If you start digging into this past, you won't just find a man. You'll open a door that the government has tried to close for 40 years. Trump didn't blink. "I'm not afraid of the truth." Benjamin looked at Trump for a long time, then finally he turned and walked into the house. "Then come in. But I warn you, when you leave this place, you will never see the world the same way again." Trump and Caldwell entered. The small dark living room was filled with old files, faded photos, memories of a man who had worked in the shadows. Benjamin sat down on a wooden chair, took out an old metal box and slammed it down on the table. Shadow One was more than just an agent. He spoke slowly, his eyes sharp as knives. He was someone the United States government wanted to disappear. He knew things that no one was allowed to know. He used to have a name, Nathan Cross. Trump leaned forward slightly, his eyes flashing dangerously. "So tell me, Graves, has Nathan Cross disappeared or been killed?" Benjamin curled his lips, then said a single sentence. "Good question, Trump. But if you really want to find Nathan Cross, you won't like the answer." Inside the old wooden house, Virginia Nathan Cross. The name rang in the air like a curse. Donald Trump leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving Benjamin Graves. Beside him, NSA Director Ethan Caldwell clenched his fists. No one in the room could have expected the name they were looking for to come out of the mouth of a man who had tried to bury it for 40 years. Benjamin Graves took a sip of his brandy, his eyes sharp as knives. Nathan Cross is no ordinary agent. He is a man who knows too much. And so the government has decided that he should no longer exist. Back in time, Operation Black Phoenix. 1981, somewhere in the heart of America. Nathan Cross is not a common name in the intelligence community. He does not appear in any official reports, does not have any legal identity in government files, because he was not created to exist. He is part of Black Phoenix, a top-secret operation of the NSA, CIA, and Pentagon to infiltrate international criminal organizations. Black Phoenix's mission? To send the most elite agents into the underground, living as criminals, acting as criminals, but always under the government's secret eye. Nathan Cross was the best agent on the job. He infiltrated the most powerful criminal organization in New York, with connections to high-ranking government officials. He worked alongside some of the world's most dangerous people, gathering information, documenting bribery, arms dealing, and secret dealings with the very people America calls leaders. But he went too far. He discovered something no one wanted him to know. He knew too much. In 1983, Nathan Cross planned to leave the criminal organization with the evidence he had collected. He believed that the government would protect him. He believed that justice would prevail. He believed that if he provided enough evidence, the political manipulators would be brought to justice. But he was wrong. They didn't want evidence. They wanted him to stay silent. Overnight, he went from undercover agent to hunted man. A secret order was issued. He was no longer a government man. He became a shadow. He became Shadow One. Back to the present, Benjamin Graves' house. Benjamin Graves paused, looking directly at Trump. Trump, I'm telling you this, not to keep looking. I'm telling you this so you know that if you keep looking, you'll be dealing with people that even the president can't touch. Trump leaned forward, his voice steady but carrying the weight of a man who had weathered every storm in his life. You said I shouldn't keep going, but if I don't, who will? Nathan Cross saved my life. I can't let him be forgotten. Caldwell interjected, his voice strained. Benjamin, if Nathan Cross is alive, can we find him? Benjamin chuckled and shook his head. I did find him. I wanted to help him come back, but he didn't want to be found. Benjamin stood up, walked over to an old wooden cabinet and opened it. He took out a small metal box and placed it on the table. This is all I have left of him. If you want to find him, start here. But remember, when you open this box, you will open a war you cannot control. Trump opened the box. Inside were old photos, faded documents, and a tape recorder. On one of the sheets of paper there was an address. Somewhere in the Chicago suburbs. He was there, Benjamin said. If you are bold enough, maybe you can find him. Trent looked at the paper in his hand, his eyes shining with determination. Let's go to Chicago. 3 days later, a cold night in the Chicago suburbs. The black SUV rolled slowly down the foggy dirt road. The sky was gray, the streetlights reflecting off the windshield. Donald Trump sat in the back seat, his sharp gaze fixed on the piece of paper with the old address Benjamin Graves had given him. Nathan Cross had been here. With any luck, he might be able to track down the man who had saved his life. Next to Trump, NSA Director Ethan Caldwell carefully examined the gun hidden in his jacket. We don't know what we're walking into, Trump. If you're right, the people who tried to take out Nathan Cross could still be watching us. Trump didn't waver. They've had 40 years to do it. If they wanted to stop me from finding him, they would have done it by now. But Trump didn't know that. He was right and wrong. They stopped in front of an old wooden house, hidden in a dense forest. No sign of anyone, the windows boarded up, the grass overgrown. The perfect place for a man to disappear. Caldwell pulled out his gun, nodded to Trump. Let me go first. He walked to the door, knocked 3 times. Silence. Knocked again. Still silence. Trump decided not to wait. He walked over, pushed the door open. It was unlocked. The house was dark, lit only by a dim oil lamp. But as soon as they entered, a sudden punch from the darkness landed squarely on Caldwell's face, sending him back a step. Before anyone could react, a figure rushed out, a pistol pointed at Trump's head. Who are you? Nathan Cross. He was still alive. Trump did not back down. He looked straight at the gun in front of him, then up into the hollow eyes of the man who had saved his life. "Nathan Cross, I've been looking for you for 40 years. Nathan said nothing, but his eyes flashed dangerously. "I don't know you. You shouldn't be here." Caldwell slowly straightened, keeping his hand near the gun but not drawing it. "We're not enemies. We just want to talk." Nathan looked at them for a few seconds, then lowered the gun, but didn't let his guard down completely. "Speak, but if I don't like what I hear, you're not leaving here in one piece." Trump took a deep breath. 40 years ago you saved me, and then you disappeared. Someone tried to erase you from history." Nathan chuckled. "No one tried to erase me, Trump. I did it myself. I saw things no one was supposed to see. I knew secrets no one was supposed to know, and because of that, I can no longer exist." Nathan poured himself a glass of wine, sat down on a chair, and motioned for Trump and Caldwell to sit across from him. "You want the truth? Fine. I used to work for the United States government. I used to believe in justice. But then I discovered the truth, that the people we call leaders are the most dangerous." Trump and Caldwell listened, not interrupting. "I have evidence of billions of dollars in bribes, illegal arms deals, secret deals between the government and criminal organizations. I have everything it takes to topple an empire. And they know it." Nathan gripped his glass, his eyes darkening. "They tried to kill me. When that didn't work, the next thing they did was turn me into a ghost. They erased my records, destroyed every trace of my existence. And they did it so I couldn't come back. Because if I showed up, I could destroy everything." Caldwell shook his head, his voice serious. If what you're saying is true, then why don't you publish it? Why don't you let the world know the truth?" Nathan stared at him, then chuckled. "The world doesn't want the truth. It only wants easy lies." Trump sat still, thinking, then he looked up, his eyes shining with determination. "I don't care if the world wants it or not, but I do. Give me the proof." Nathan looked at him for a long time. Then he stood up, walked to a corner of the room and pulled out an old metal box. He placed it on the table in front of Trump. "It's all here. But remember, Trump, when you open this box, there's no going back." Trump didn't blink. He put his hand on the box, then opened it. Inside were files, photos, recordings, evidence of a conspiracy that had been hidden for 40 years. And then outside the house, another black SUV was silently approaching. Little did Trump know that he had just opened the door to a war he could not control. Chicago suburbs, a night not to be missed. In a small wooden house, Donald Trump quietly flipped through the pages of documents inside an old metal box. The evidence was here. Secrets that the government did not want anyone to know. Pieces of a conspiracy that could change the course of American history. Next to him, NSA Director Ethan Caldwell stared at the photos and documents spread out on the old wooden table. Each page, each line carried a dark truth, a truth that no one was allowed to know. "My God," Caldwell exclaimed. "If this is true, it could shake Washington." Trump lifted a thick stack of documents, his eyes glinting sharply. Secret arms contracts, deals between government officials and international criminal organizations, secret purges, and most importantly, the list of people who have been erased over the past 40 years. People like Nathan Cross, agents who fought for America, but were betrayed by America. Nathan Cross picked up his glass and took a sip. He looked not at the documents, but directly at Trump. "I've had them for 40 years, and you know why I never showed them?" Trump looked up, his eyes sharp. "Are you scared?" Nathan laughed, a humorless laugh. "No, Trump, I'm not scared, but I know the game. I know the people pulling the strings." He gestured to the files in front of Trump. "If you think you can just take this stuff in front of the cameras and expose it all, you're wrong. The truth doesn't work that way. The people at the top have been in power for too long. They won't let you do it." Caldwell interjected, his voice grave. "Nathan, If we don't do anything, then all your work over the past 40 years has been for nothing." Nathan was silent for a few seconds. Then he stood up, walked to the window, and looked out into the night. "I'm not a hero, Trump. I'm not a savior. I'm just a man tired of fighting a war he can't win." He turned back to look at Trump. "But you're different." Trump made a decision. "We will bring the truth to light." Trump placed his hand on the file, his fingers tightening. "I don't care what they want. I don't care how strong they are. The American people deserve to know the truth." Nathan looked at him for a long time, then nodded slightly. He turned back to the table, opened a secret drawer, took out a small USB drive, and placed it on the table in front of Trump. "If you really want to do this, then start here. In here is all the digital evidence that I have kept for the past 40 years. But Trump, remember, once you cross this line, there is no turning back." Trump picked up the USB drive, holding it tightly in his hand. "I never turned back." At that moment, Nathan froze. He tilted his head to listen for a small sound from outside, a slight noise, but in his world it meant only one thing. Someone was coming. Nathan pulled out his gun, walked to the window, and pulled back the curtain slightly. He saw 2 black SUVs without license plates, parked quietly outside. Figures in dark suits were approaching the house. Caldwell pulled out his gun and whispered, "We have guests." Nathan turned around, his eyes sharp. "They're coming faster than I thought." "Trump, if you want to live, we have to leave now." Trump showed no fear. He clenched the USB in his hand, looking straight at Nathan. "What about you?" Nathan smiled faintly. "I disappeared once. I can do it again." He walked to the table, opened a small safe, and took out a pistol and a fake passport. "I'll hold them off." "You and Caldwell go now," Caldwell protested. "Nathan, you can't take them on alone." Nathan smirked. "That's the only thing I'm good at." Trump and Caldwell quickly left the house, sneaking out the back door. They drove into their SUV, the engine revving. In the distance, they heard gunshots ringing out in the night. Nathan Cross had stayed behind, but he had delivered the truth. The car sped off into the night, carrying evidence that would shake Washington. Trump knew this was just the beginning. NSA headquarters, Washington, D.C. 3 days after his escape from Chicago, Donald Trump sat in a closed-door conference room at NSA headquarters. In front of him was a large screen, displaying top-secret documents extracted from Nathan Cross's USB drive. Ethan Caldwell, the director of the NSA, stood beside him, his eyes tense. The evidence in their hands revealed more than just a political conspiracy. It could shake the very foundations of Washington. A list of government officials involved in backroom deals, evidence of assassinations covered up as accidents, billions of dollars in funding for organizations the public has never heard of. Trump flipped through the files silently, his eyes darkening. "They think they can get away with it, but I'm not going to let that happen." The next day, in Washington, D.C., hundreds of reporters gathered in front of the NSA building. Cameras from all the major news outlets, CNN, Fox News, NBC, were trained on the podium. They didn't know exactly what was going on. They just knew that Trump had called an emergency press conference. When Trump took the podium, there was silence. He didn't need drama. He didn't need hype. He just needed to state the truth. "I'm not here today to talk about myself. I'm here to talk about a man the government tried to erase from history. His name is Nathan Cross. 40 years ago, he sacrificed everything to expose a dark conspiracy, and to hide the truth, they turned him into a ghost." A chorus of murmurs rose from the crowd. Trump continued, his voice strong. "But I won't let them do it. I have proof." At that moment, the big screen behind him turned on, displaying top-secret documents from Nathan's USB. A shockwave swept across the United States. Within hours, all news channels were broadcasting the documents that Trump had just released. A 40-year-old conspiracy has just been exposed. Who are the people behind the Black Phoenix operation? Nathan Cross. A forgotten hero or a dangerous man? Lawmakers quickly took action. A federal investigation was opened, targeting officials who were involved in Black Phoenix. The documents Trump released raised serious questions about how the U.S. government had handled covert operations in the past. And then, the unexpected happened. the incumbent president had to hold an emergency press conference. For the first time in 40 years, the White House officially admitted that Nathan Cross was a government agent, but they still avoided one question: is he alive or dead? In Trump's hotel room in D.C., an anonymous phone rang. He picked it up. A deep, familiar voice rang out. "You did what no one else dared to do, Trump." Trump chuckled. "Nathan. I hope you're watching the news." Nathan was silent for a few seconds, then chuckled. "You really dropped a bomb on this system. But I can't show up. Not now." Trump nodded, knowing Nathan couldn't see. "I don't need you to come out. I just need the world to know the truth." A brief pause. "Thank you, Trump. Not for my honor, for not letting me be forgotten." The call ended. And Trump knew that whether Nathan Cross was alive or not, he had done his job. 2 weeks later, a small ceremony was held at the NSA. On the agency's wall of honor, a new name was engraved. Nathan Cross, the man who was once forgotten. Now, America knows him. He is no longer a ghost. Trump stood before the wall, looking at that name. He said nothing, just nodded. He had fulfilled his promise. He had restored honor to a man who should never have been forgotten. And though the government may not want to admit it, Nathan Cross had prevailed. The truth had finally come out. Nathan Cross's story is more than just that of a betrayed agent. It is a reminder that the truth cannot be buried forever. That sometimes, all it takes is one person with the courage to stand up, and the world will listen. That justice does not come from those in power, but from those who never give up on the truth. What about you? Do you believe that the truth can prevail? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story makes you think, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell so you don't miss out on other inspiring stories. Remember, the truth always exists, if only someone dares to look for it. Thanks for watching. See you in the next stories.